listening to Coffee and Conversation with Recovery Advocate Network, the nonprofit organization that strives to address the staggering disparity in resource availability for individuals suffering from mental health disorders, processing disorders, addictions, trauma healing, and sexual identity challenges. Together, we strive to end the stigma associated with these challenges so that true healing can begin. Welcome back to Coffee and Conversation with Recovery Advocate Network. I'm your host, Ange, and welcome you to episode number 27. Today, we welcome Sasha Young, the wife of Joshua Young from episode number 26. This is the second episode of a unique three-part series where I interviewed Joshua about his story and book, and today we'll interview his wife, Sasha, about her perspective supporting him, and finally, I'll then interview her for the third part on her personal trauma story. This episode includes sensitive topics. If you feel you may be triggered, then we encourage you to listen to the episode in a therapeutic community to ensure you are safe and supported. So, what are we waiting for? Fill up your coffee, sit back, and let's get started. Alrighty, so let's do it.
My name is Sasha Young. I am Josh Young's wife. I'm an esthetician. I'm a business owner for OC Skin Vibes. OC Skin Vibes came to me in 2020. I had been laid off 3 times between 2016 and 2019. And I just kind of looked at Josh and said, I need to do something different. And I'm going to go back to school with my passion. So I just did that really quickly. I literally graduated in 15 weeks and opened up a business in June 2020 and with zero clients. It's been fun. It's been amazing. It's been a journey. I love every moment of it. And all the while, my husband has been writing this amazing book about his experiences with alcohol. And it's been amazing for both of us.
Amazing. So listeners, we kind of jumped in there, and part of it is because oftentimes I find that I'm talking to guests before I hit record, and then we say amazing things and I hate it because I think, wait, we could have captured that during it. And so, yes, listeners, this is Ange, your host, and this is Sasha Young, the wife of Josh Young, who is the author of Craving Recovery. And this episode is going to play and be published the week following Josh's. I'm very excited about this opportunity because I think in the recovery community, we often hear the story of the individual who has struggled. We hear their story of when they were struggling, what they went through to overcome that, and what life is like after that. And occasionally, if you're in perhaps Al-Anon or in some of those areas, you hear the story of the significant other on the other side of it. However, Josh put into his book so much about his wife, Sasha. So when I read the book, I had this feeling that Josh, 1, really loves Sasha, and 2, Sasha's badass, because the amount of different steps, like I will read a part of the book when I thought, wow, this is a unique Valentine's Day gift that he gave you one year. He starts in the book and he talks about his challenges growing up and how he learned, for example, that telling the truth didn't really get him the love or the feeling of love that he would have wanted. So he learned how to lie from a very young age because omission got him to what he needed. It was like he was rewarded for omitting things. So he learned that in life, which then fed into his addiction, right? So on page 15, where he says, it was Valentine's Day and I made the conscious decision to go get help. And then on page 21, so he comes to Sasha on Valentine's Day, and you're going to tell this story, but I'm just going to read a little snippet out of the book. He comes to Sasha and, he doesn't, I don't know. I mean, he didn't bring you a vacuum cleaner. or dishwasher, nor chocolates or roses. I don't know. Maybe he brought
Nope.
those as well. Instead, he said, hey, I need help and I need to go to treatment. And he says on page 21, and this is when I read this and I said, okay, Sasha is badass at this point, because he said, my wife took control of everything and I was too emotional to deal with making plans for rehab upon returning home. So he told you, I need help. So on Valentine's Day, you had a family trip planned. So you guys went and did your family trip. And he had talked to some friends about researching rehab. So then he told you that information, went to the trip. He was too emotional to deal with it. And you just kind of said, okay, I'm going to deal with this. And then he says, Sasha was my hero at the moment and was quite calm and collected. Although I felt bad as this wasn't her issue, it was mine. But she reminded me that we were a team and we'd get through this together. So that's what Joshua put in this book. And I did say Joshua there because I think he said you call him Joshua when he's in trouble. And I believe he was probably in trouble at this stage of the book. So, we're laying her year aside.
So, I was in the bathroom getting ready for work that morning. And he came in. He had just gotten out of the shower from his bathroom. We had separate bathrooms. I had the master and he shared the kids' bathroom because that's just what he wanted to do. He wanted his own separate bathroom. So he came in and he sat down on the side of the tub and he said, I have to talk to you. And I said, what? And I turned around. He goes, I have a drinking problem and I need help. And I said, thank God you finally admitted that, because I've known for a while that you've had a drinking problem. And great, you just had the first step of admitting that you have a problem. So we'll work on it. We'll get you some help and I'll help you out. We're a team. We'll get through this together. And that was really important for me to tell him that, because I too come from an alcoholic family. And so I see, a lot of drinking going on between my parents and my dad and my stepmom and my stepdad and my mom. Like, I've just been around it my entire life. But I would say that it was such an important moment for him to come and talk to me about this, that I needed to stay calm and collected for him, because what he was discussing with me was the biggest secret, one of the biggest secrets that he's ever had. And so that was really, really important for him to come to me. So I just needed to be calm and collected for him and give him as much support as he needed in that moment. We had a trip planned to go to Lake Arrowhead that weekend. Both of the boys were relatively young, the younger boys. There's 4 of them, his 2 and my 2. And so the younger boys, we were all ready to go to Lake Arrowhead and have snow time and family time. And he was really nervous about going. He thought about maybe we should cancel. I said, no, we just need to go do this for the boys. And, we'll maintain this weekend and I'll check in with you and, we'll just go from there. In the meantime, I was having conversations with 2 of the people that he was having conversations with about getting help. So I had conversations with them because I needed to understand what I was getting into, what needed to be done, what my role was going to be in this, and how I needed to support him. So I talked to them. We had discussions about a medical detox. We had discussions about the 30-day detox. I needed to get as much information from them that I could relay to Josh and figure out what was going to be the best way for us to get through this transition. So going to Lake Arrowhead that weekend gave us that opportunity to take this information and really make a wise choice. I also called his HR department and I talked to HR. I got a lot of information from them about FMLA, which was really important, because how much time that he was going to take off was kind of up in the air at that moment. were we going to just medical detox for 10 days or were we actually going to be in a 30-day facility? So Sunday morning, coming out from Lake Arrowhead, he came to me and he says, I think I need to go in tonight. And I said, okay, great. So I called the guys that I had been in touch with and I said, we're ready to go tonight. We're coming down the mountain. They said, okay, great. Josh had conversations with them as well that day. And I believe one of them had mentioned, well, now's not the time just to go cold turkey. You need to just to kind of maintain. So before Josh had any drinks, we kind of got down the mountain. It had been snowing that night. So I needed him to get us off the mountain before he had anything to drink. But I could tell by the time that we got down off the mountain that Sunday, he was ready. He was crawling out of his skin. So I said, let's just stop by, McDonald's really quick. I'll take the boys into McDonald's. There's a liquor store right here. I think you just need to go and handle what you need to do right now. So I took the boys into McDonald's. They had absolutely no idea what was going on while Josh went over to the liquor store and got himself what I thought was a small bottle of alcohol. And, we got home. We washed his clothes and I, got him into a facility. But it was super important for me that moment that he told me on Valentine's Day, that he had a drinking problem, that he needed help. It was important for me just to maintain head clarity and hear what he was telling me.
Okay, so you worked with Jack and Anthony to select a treatment center.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that? Now, I did kind of tease Josh and say, okay, well, the treatment center that you went to is quite different than the one a lot of other ones went to. I mean, he did go to one that was pretty nice from what I hear, and I love the experiences. So I can't wait. One of the things that we have to make sure we talk about is how you experienced the wolf therapy. So we will have that on our checklist to talk about. However, I love the experience and the different opportunities of treatment and treatment modalities that particular treatment center had. And I also did observe he did only stay there. He did just do 10 days, right? That's what it was.
Medical
so when
detox.
you were so when you were looking at and evaluating different options, and also listeners, if you're not aware, treatment is incredibly expensive. I mean, this is a huge financial commitment. And quite frankly, a lot of individuals relapse and have to have additional treatments. And Josh talks about his relapse journey within the book. So can you maybe tell us a little bit, Sasha, when you were working with Jack and Anthony and you were talking about these different potentials, what made you pick this particular center? Like what kind of stood out to you and gave you confidence in this one?
So I'll be quite frank. It was absolutely a money factor, right? I mean, treatment centers are super expensive. Jack and Anthony, one of them was already working with the facility because they too, well, actually both of them were addicts, alcoholics. So one of them, the alcoholic, I believe, I'm sorry, I don't recall which is who in the book. But one of them was working with a facility, and this guy happened to also be my cousin's best friend. So it ended up being a very small world. And so when I told him, I said, you also are, my cousin's best friend. He goes, oh, family discount. And I went, oh my God, thank you so much. I had honestly had no idea the type of facility that we were getting into. It was strictly a money factor because facilities are super expensive. This also ended up being the best possible place that we could have ended up taking him. It was a very small, intimate facility that only had, I believe, 6 to 10 patients at a time. He had his own room, which was phenomenal. And I could go and visit him. They were very strict, but they were also very humanized because everybody in the facility had an issue or two. But choosing a facility was easy for us because the fact that I had already had someone that was in a facility working with a facility, I kind of had my ins with that person. And then they kind of walked me through portion of talking to HR, talking to the intake nurse and kind of getting us all of our ducks in a row before we took Josh into intake. So that was also very helpful. Honestly, having a team of people just to be able to talk to and run scenarios through and worst case scenarios, all about the things that are just really unknown to you is super, super helpful. Definitely finding someone that has been in this situation to talk to was amazing.
I was trying to look back in the book, and listeners, I'm going to bring up this other episode a couple of times in talking to Sasha because it ties to Josh's story, and I want to hear how this impacted Sasha when you heard the underlying challenge that was really leading to the addiction that Joshua had. But going to that particular center and how I just think what a blessing that all of these factors tied in to allow him to go there and to allow you to be able to visit.
Yes.
When I read the book and I saw that, I thought, what an absolute blessing. But on page 41 of the book, Joshua talks about some of the different items that or modalities that were allowed there, techniques for holistic health and treatment. And I'm not sure that all of these were there, but he does talk about these as like holistic healing or acupuncture, aromatherapy, which I do know he did acupuncture there several times. Aromatherapy he did there, hypnotherapy, guided imagery, reflexology, yoga, tai chi, qigong. I don't think I pronounced that right. I'll try and pronounce that in the outro. Right?
I'm not sure.
I'll practice it. I'll play it on Google. And Reiki, meditation, and then progressive relaxation. So the episode that I want to tie to, though, is episode 13, which is the link between childhood trauma and addiction. And in that episode, I talked to the clinical director of Ripple Ranch, and we talk about the benefits of going to a treatment center that has different modalities so that you can then try different ways to recover in a safe environment. Mm-hmm. And so I love that you were able to do that and that you're able to find one that you were able to join. So, but let's maybe just go back a couple of steps. And so you take him there. First off, you wash his clothes, which I guess wasn't needed because they were going to wash them.
Right. So they totally wash. So when you are entered into a facility, they literally take everything because they want to make sure that you're not bringing something in for somebody else or for yourself. So they rewash your clothes because people can hide things everywhere and seams of clothing. I mean, places you probably wouldn't even think about. So they washed everything and then they gave him back his washed clothes a couple hours later at the facility, all nice and folded and smelling fantastic.
And quite frankly, I've talked to a lot of treatment centers and I've been in treatment centers before for my PTSD and I've never seen that before. So now I wonder if more and more treatment centers will start doing that. I laughed actually, I have a service dog and at the third treatment center that I went to for my debilitating nightmares from my event, I said to them afterwards, I said, do you guys realize I've had a service dog with a service dog vest in 3 different treatment centers and not a single center checked my previous service dog's vest.
Wow.
And I know they were like, we are now checking service dogs vest, but it was funny. And I didn't, and they said, well, you weren't coming in. It didn't occur to them because I wasn't coming in with like a drug addiction or something like that. But still, anyways, it was kind of funny when I read that and thought about that. Okay. So back to you, you take him and you drop him off and you turn around and drive home. Can you share with us your emotions and your feeling? Because you've had since Valentine's Day to this moment, you've been his rock. You've been cool, calm, and collect. You've been in organizational mode and now you've dropped him off.
Yeah. I mean, gosh, driving home after dropping him off was super emotional. Just wondering what he was feeling, what he was going through, how scared he was, if he was going through withdrawals, how bad his withdrawals were. Was he going to sleep that night? I think for me, I was more stressed for him than I was for myself, just because I loved this person. I don't want this person to go through hardship, although I recognize that, he's got a drinking problem. He's going to end up having these withdrawals and he's going to have to go through the motions of withdrawing and detoxing and coming to terms with why he's drinking. This is going to be a really emotional journey for him. It was emotional for me. I think I probably cried all the way home. In fact, I do remember crying on the way home. When I got home, the boys were at home. My boys. His youngest was with his mom. My boys were very in tune with what was going on with me and were there for me. And I was very appreciative of that. But yeah, it was an emotional ride home.
So tell me a little bit about how did it feel when you then came? So this situation was unique because he was in a 10-day detox, and a lot of centers are in that 10-day detox or however long the detox is. Some you can't have any communication with the outside world. And I want to be very clear to listeners, every single treatment center is unique. And so this is the experience of one treatment center and one individual's experience. So I do want to remind everyone of that. And that's why it's so important to have a diverse audience and a diverse group speaking of this so that we can hear so many different experiences. Tell me this. So now he's there and he's really starting to struggle through the detox. And he's got these motivational quotes, which I love that in the book, where he's writing each one of them because I'm obsessed with motivational quotes. And you're at home and you're talking to him. Can you tell me about kind of your emotions, perhaps through those 10 days, and then when you went to visit him the first time?
Okay, so talking to him the first time was probably about 48 hours after I dropped him off. So it was a real emotional 48 hours of just wondering, right? Because I haven't talked to him. I haven't seen him. I'm curious as to what's going on, how he's doing, how his withdrawal symptoms are, what's going on in this facility. And I finally get a phone call from him, and it was just so nice to hear him. I could hear his voice was clear. He was sober. He was emotional. I think we probably had maybe 10 minutes to talk. It was more of, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How are the boys? There was so much to talk about in 10 minutes. 10 minutes simply wasn't long enough. I don't know how many I love yous I told him. Yeah, it was really emotional. And then I think the first day that I got to see him, I dropped him off on a Sunday. I think the first time I got to see him was that Friday. So it had already been about 5 days. It was, I think I was going for lunch, and that was what my stay was just for lunch. And so I came out for lunch and he walked me around the facility. It was beautiful. And I got to hug him, and he just looked so good, and his skin was looking good. And his eyes weren't red or bloodshot, and he just looked great. But I could tell that he had a lot going on because he was super emotional when he saw me, which made me emotional. It was just a great visit. He took me upstairs. I got to see his room. His room was beautiful. He had his own bathroom. Most of the rooms in there actually they were sharing rooms. I think there was maybe only one or two that had an individual bed in there, and his was one of them. The facility was fantastic. The next time that I got to go visit him was for wolf therapy.
Okay, so I have to say, of course, I like everyone who read the book. And when he wrote wolf therapy, and then he was like, WTF, right? That's exactly what, and I was tempted, listeners, I was totally tempted to skip ahead and just keep scanning so I could find out what wolf there. And I thought, no, surely it's some acronym for something. Surely it's whatever. I was so excited. So tell me about this experience. I am dying.
It was pretty intense and amazing at the same time. You've got these animals that are just huge, at least 150 to 200 pounds. I mean, their heads are ginormous. And so you have to sign a waiver. Anything that you have in your hands, if they decide to take it, it's theirs. You can't grab it back. I got to, Josh poured water in my hands. I got to feed them and they drank out of my hands, which was amazing. We have photos of that. They are just a very gentle giant. It's a trust thing with them. Can't really look at them in their eyes. I don't know. It was just, you had to be submissive to this gentle giant. That is really what it was. You had to submit to their presence of them being the leader of the pack. Just being there in front of them and having them being gentle and drinking out of your hands and eating out of your hands, and the trust that they gave to you was just amazing. Just amazing. It was a good therapy of learning how to trust again.
I love that part right there. Learning how to trust again. Tell me then, you're at home. So one challenge, especially for individuals, and we talk a lot about this on other episodes of the podcast. I think maybe episode 10, we talk about Joshua's story of recovery from alcohol. And I met Joshua at my first treatment center, and now he is director of Alana Recovery in Georgia. And so we talk about one of the challenges being an individual, especially if they go to a longer program, and then they come home and they're now back in this stressful environment. They don't have the strict individuals watching every move that they make. They don't have those fallbacks. They have the high stress. They have the things that the people, places, and things that remind them of whatever their addiction is. And I want to be very clear. We're talking about alcohol right now. This applies to every single type of addiction. So
absolutely,
food addictions, drugs, sex addictions, anything you can imagine. Okay. I would love to see treatment centers that had solid recovery programs for the family members at the exact same time that the individual is in recovery. So that when the individual comes home, they've both been kind of learning about the challenges, what's led up to it, and the underlying thing, because that trust factor has been broken so much there, right? And the individual oftentimes coming back is like, look, like, you should trust me now. I just spent X number of days in this. And here, Sasha, you're like, no, I've been at home as a single mom for this number of days, and I've been your rock. And now you're coming into this and you haven't done anything to show me that I should trust. So can you maybe talk about that initial period of time? And then, of course, there was a period where that trust was then broken. Can you kind of talk about what that journey was?
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that for a second. So breaking my trust, like, actually, where did that start? At what point in our relationship that we've been together now 12 years was that trust starting to be broken by him, by lying to me? Where did that start? So for me, I kind of needed to go backwards a little bit. I kind of needed to sit down with him and have conversations of things that didn't make sense to me in our relationship, to get clarity on some of these things. Because, I mean, in his active state of drinking, the lies just came out profusely. But that is the active state of an alcoholic or an addict. That is the disease talking. It's not necessarily who they are as a person. I think that's important to say. So for me, I had to go back and really understand parts of our relationship that didn't make sense to me. So I needed him to clarify things in our previous parts of our relationship, and he did. And when he came home from rehab, before he came home, I needed to understand what his needs were going to be. I needed to understand, for me, what an alcoholic, what the triggers could be. So I literally read books. I just needed to understand the alcoholic brain. So I understood how I could help him better. understanding that your brain is a sponge and just absorbs all of this alcohol, and understanding that it's not treated, that seizures can take place. And if seizures are the one thing that can absolutely kill you. And the one thing that I learned out of addiction is that alcohol is the withdrawal can absolutely kill you. Opioids and other drugs, those withdrawals can be maintained, but they can't kill you like alcohol can. And that was super important for me to know, because I knew that I was going to have Josh come home, and I needed to be aware of these things. I also needed to be aware of where he was hiding his alcohol. So I needed him to talk to me about where his hiding places were. And I didn't get all of the hiding places at first, right? Because
Did you know of any of them ahead of time? So were there any before Valentine's Day that you're like,
yep. Yes. So I had actually found a lot of bottles in the garage. I found bottles in places you probably wouldn't think, like a golf bag. I found bottles in empty boxes, lots of bottles and boxes. For me, dude, you could just go to the trash can and throw these away. I wouldn't have seen them. I wouldn't even known how much alcohol that you've been drinking if you would have just taken it and thrown it in the trash can. But when I'm finding your handles and your fifth, I can now tell you how much alcohol that you're drinking. And I find it amusing that him specifically, I need to talk about him. He used to just pack rat. Like, I don't want to throw this in the trash because she might find it. But yet, if it's sitting next to you or in a drawer or in a bag, I'm probably more likely going to see it there than I would in the trash can. Right?
And to be clear, addicts and alcoholics, we're not giving you tips on but it's funny how the brain works in all of us in situations. And when we want to try and hide and lie about things, and then later we find out, wait, we weren't so good at doing X, Y, and Z that we thought we were.
Right.
So,
I think one of his favorite hiding spots was the inside and back of the toilet.
Yeah, that was funny.
Yes. And it could only be plastic bottles. It couldn't be glass bottles, because when you flush the toilet, they clanked. The glass bottles clanked. They made noise.
Which, when I read that in the book, I pictured him doing it with a glass bottle and trying it and then saying, oh, wait, that's not going to work, right? I can picture that, right? When the movie is made, that scene is going to be in there and the rattle is going to, or some guest, he's not going to know it. Okay, if there's a screenplay person out there that's going to produce this is what you should do. You should have I don't know, maybe a grandparent that goes to use the bathroom and then they come out like, your toilet is making some really weird noise.
Right. They'll go in there and there'll be like a dozen bottles. Yeah. I don't know. I used to find bottles all over the place. I'd find them in the laundry room, in one of the cabinets at the very top. And, I don't know, we'd be cleaning out the garage. My parents would be there and he would be really stressed about it. This is something that I remember specifically. My parents were here one time. We were cleaning the garage and he was very stressed about us being in that second garage. He would just come in just really irritated. I'm like, what's wrong with you? He's like, nothing. I'm fine. Your parents don't need to go through all of this stuff. I can go through all this. And I'm like, dude, we're just cleaning, like springtime cleaning, right? It's not a big deal. Well, then we started finding all these bottles and my mom kept looking at me like, where are all these bottles? And I'm like, I don't know, but I can only imagine where this is coming from. One person specifically, but it wasn't my job to tell him that he was an addict. That had to be something that he needed to come to me and tell me, right? Because I can tell him until I'm blue in the face, but that doesn't mean that he recognizes it or that he identifies with that. It needed to be him coming to me. So I just would keep track kind of in my mind, not necessarily I'm keeping track, you're like 10 bottles in, or I found 10 bottles. I would just take note mentally and just always be aware. And I would have, friends tell me, hey, you should watch his drinking, because I watched him just guzzle a bottle of vodka one week. And I'm like, oh, I'm aware of his vodka drinking. I'm very aware of his vodka drink, but I wasn't aware to what extent he would go out in the middle of the night and drink in the garage. Or he would tell me, it would be 2 minutes, 2 minute rule. He would ask me, do I need to get your nighttime tea? And I'd say, yes, please. And he would put my tea in the microwave and then go out in the garage and drink as much as he possibly can of that fifth without vomiting. A lot of times he did, unbeknownst to me. And then, he'd bring me up my tea in like 2 minutes. So I had absolutely no idea. Definitely, we needed therapy. Therapy was super important. Obviously, there was an underlying, I felt like there was skeletons in his closet that weren't coming out. It was just my instinct as a woman. I just felt that there was just things that he hadn't been talking about. When he was in rehab at the detox center, he had one session with a therapist. And at the moment, I felt like he had come clean. But now in hindsight, when I think about it, there was still things in there that I could feel that he hadn't shared with me yet. One of them being his shadow monster. Going back to the trust of really of talking openly with a therapist, even all of our therapy conversations, he still had not talked to me about the root cause of his drinking, which was his shadow monster. I vividly remember October 2019, I was having a conversation with him and it smacked me in the face. Oh my God, I'm looking in the mirror. And I looked at him and I said, have you been molested? Have you been sexually molested? And he goes, no, never, never. And I was like, okay, because I kind of feel like I'm looking at a mirror right now. Things that you are doing and saying are things that I have been doing and saying because I was molested at 6. So I'm recognizing some of these characteristics in you. Are you sure? And he goes, no, never. Again, we're talking about trust. You need to come and trust me with your deepest secret. I'm not going to judge you on it. I'm an open book. You know about my molestation when I was 6. And every time I would talk about mine, he would just kind of, I really want to talk about it. But talking with our therapist, there was one time when Josh and I after he had already told me that he had been sexually abused, I had mentioned to the therapist, it's so therapeutic for me to be able to talk about it because I feel like I'm taking my own power back. I wish that he would talk about his because he would feel like he's getting his power back too. He stopped that conversation real quick and said, I will never disclose most of the things that this person ever did to me. I don't feel good about talking about it. I just want it to go away. And I started crying at that moment. And he goes, this is why I can't talk to her about it because she reacts this way. And I said, actually, I'm reacting for you. It hurts me that somebody hurt you so badly that you can't have this conversation. And that all pulls into the trust factor. You have to be completely open. I needed him to talk to me about these things, about his shadow monster. He needed to trust me so I could trust him again. And that was important for me. But going back, we definitely had to go through a lot of therapy to earn back that trust. There was probably a lot of things that I needed him to do for me so I could earn back that trust. Share with me your location on your phone and don't turn it off. I would like to know, not that I'm going to hound you and look at my phone every 5 minutes, but if I'm curious and I want to know where you're at and you're telling me you're someplace, I want to be able to believe you. So yeah, I did. I had him share his location with me. Did he like that? No, he felt like he was like someone was babysitting him, and I'm sorry that you felt that way, but you're earning my trust back. And these are the things that I need to have in order for me to trust you again. So Josh jumped through a lot of hoops for me so I can trust him again. He would bring me his receipts every time he went to the grocery store. I didn't purchase anything. There's no alcohol in here. Did I think, well, you could have done a second transaction? Yes. Let me see your statements. I need to see so I can trust again. But also with that, I also recognize that he's an adult. I can't force him to be sober. Only he can. He is responsible for himself. So he's going to have to, trust is going to take time. It's not just going to be an overnight thing. It's going to be a constant, and it's going to be constant nurturing the trust and oversharing on his portion so I can feel that trust again. Today, if Josh decided that he wanted to go out and drink, that's not something that I can control. That's his decision. He knows what the repercussions of that are going to be. That's his choice. Do I trust him? Yes, I do trust him today. He's jumped through those hoops to make me feel comfortable that I can trust him again in going to the grocery store and not buying alcohol, because the only person that he's honestly hurting is himself. He's lying to himself if he goes to the grocery store and buys alcohol and doesn't tell me. He's lying, not me. So, and he had to learn to trust himself too. That was important, of him learning to trust himself.
That's a powerful statement right there. We often forget that, learning to trust ourselves. I think that gets lost in the mix a lot. And I believe, so now that we've talked about the shadow monster, Josh unfortunately was, I wouldn't call it molested. I would say in the book that he was raped and taken advantage of and all of these awful things when he was in middle school or high school. And
13 to 15.
Yeah, 13 to 15.
Very vulnerable stage at that age.
Yes, exactly. And I have severe sexual abuse in my story as well. And I find, though, in reading this and trying to think about a perspective from a man's perspective, when another man has done that, and then that added stigma of a heterosexual man, and this has happened to him, and that added shame component of it. And so I could totally, I just remember just my heart reading about that and thinking about some of the things that happened and the manipulation that, he was very much primed. He was very much, he stood out as someone that was an easy target. And so he stood out as an easy target, and then he was primed for it. And then he was slowly edged into it. And then he was manipulated afterwards and bribed and blackmailed afterwards. And then he was finally strong enough to say, no, enough is enough. Right. So he went through that whole journey. However, that impact and that trauma and that adverse childhood experience add to the way that he learned to lie early on in life. And that link and that trauma. So that's where I'm tying back to that episode, listeners. Go back and listen to the link between childhood trauma and addiction. It's episode 13. And we walk through that. There's so much evidence that shows that, of course, he would find maladaptive coping mechanisms, which would be alcohol, to be able to deal with that and then not realize it. And I find that a lot of individuals will go into treatment and they will treat the solution. So they will treat the alcohol. Okay. Myself included. I would go into treatment and treat one solution for my severe PTSD. And I was a very good Girl Scout. So if you take away this tool, I can very well pick up another tool, which happens so much. They just go from one addiction to another because that shadow monster, whatever your individual shadow monster is, the lies, the deceit, the childhood rape, and all of the predatory things that happened, all that underlying, if it's not dealt with and empowered and you can't take that back, then you can't live your full life that we all deserve.
Can't live your full truth.
Yes.
Can't live your full truth.
I can picture you sitting there and just crying for him and thinking that you've experienced so much healing by sharing your story, and you love him so much and you want him to experience the same kind of healing that you've experienced.
I do. I want him to take his power back and be able to talk about it. And because the more that you talk about your experience, the more power that you're taking back and the more healing that you're feeling. It just feels good. You're taking everything back that was taken from you at such a young age, your voice, your trust, and trusting yourself. Like, how do you trust yourself to make decisions on who to trust in your life if you made such a bad choice with this person that could really hurt you or did hurt you? How do you fix that so you can trust yourself into making better decisions in people?
So relapse is a part of Josh's story.
Yes.
And so he was working to rebuild your trust, and he was going
Yes.
through all these, and he did have a relapse. So can you tell us about how that worked on your side?
So his first relapse, I wasn't really privy to. I think I gave Josh a lot more leeway, slack, to give himself some room to breathe rather than just holding the reins so close to me and keeping him in a little distance. I just gave him his own rein. His second one, we were in the middle of a move, and I had gone back to the old house to kind of clean up, and I put all this stuff in a big trash bag. And Josh came back later that night. I needed him to do some things. So I came back the next day to take another load of stuff back. And I went to put more trash back in the bag that I had just opened up the night before. And here was this handle of vodka. And I knew immediately this was fresh because I had just packed this bag yesterday. So I took this bottle out. I stuck it in my car and I went home. Josh came back that night to finish what he was doing at the house. And he came home, and I could tell he had been drinking, because now that I knew that I had this bottle in my hand that he wasn't aware that I had, all of this started coming familiar to me. And I went, you're drunk. So now I get it. So he came upstairs and I said, so how was your day? And he goes, it was fine. And he was acting a little irritated. And so I said to him, I said, are you doing okay? I need to check in with you. I haven't done a check-in with you in a while. He goes, yeah, I'm fine. I'm doing great. I don't know why you're asking me this, and why are you on me? And I said, well, because this bottle right here is telling me that you're not doing so well. And he kind of like looked at me like, what is he going to say? I have a handle of empty vodka in my hand. Now he's been caught. And I said, I can't go through this again. This is literally ruining our life. This bottle is ruining our life. I can't go through this again. This is going to be our third time around. So third time's the charm, and you need to be clean and sober. And I think that's the day that he was like, okay, like, she means business. This is it. This is your last round with me before I leave, because I have to respect myself enough too, right? Because it's not just myself. I also have kids that are watching this happen in the household, and you are a product of your environment, and we are responsible for our own actions. And so he needed to make decisions, and so he made a good decision that day. That was his last day of drinking, and today is his sobriety date. Of May 30th.
That's amazing. I can picture that moment and think about how much his stomach probably dropped at that moment. Yeah. And so I'll share one thing in the book, and then I want to get back to you. So in several episodes, and I interviewed Scott Lynch, the host of The Motivated Mind, who is like my podcast idol. I was like a giddy scroll girl interviewing him because he's so amazing. But one of the things that he says is, don't compare your chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 10. Mm-hmm. And so listeners, when you read, I hope you will read Josh's book, a lot of this will make a lot of sense. And he talks about so many things throughout, especially in the end of the book, about different areas of recovery, relapse prevention plans that are so critical and so important, about getting a sponsor and about therapy. And he talks about all of that. And what I find, especially because now we're going to talk about what today looks like with Sasha and with Josh. And so we're going to talk about kind of, maybe we're in chapter 8 of the Young's life. But I will highlight, because Josh puts it in the book, he's very vulnerable about it. And I have similar stories about divorces and challenges. And so he lists, this is like his chapter 1, is he says, I never thought I'd get married 3 times, have 2 kids with different mothers, attempt suicide several times, spend time in a mental institution, become an alcoholic, and now be admitted into a treatment facility. I wondered how I'd got to this point. And yet he married you and you were a solid rock hero for him. And you held him accountable with love and grace and compassion, but with a firm, this is your decision and you were going to make or break it for yourself. Mm-hmm. And now the two of you have been together for 12 years in your blended family. And after you had that moment and you said, this is it, that's his sobriety date. So tell us, Sasha, where are you at today? And how do you feel about the book being out and everything written in the book? Tell us a little bit about both of those topics.
Today, Josh and I are doing great. He's 4.5 years sober. I love sober Josh. I have fallen in love with him all over again because honestly, when we got married, he was an active alcoholic. So the person that I married, I didn't actually know. And so I needed to know who my new husband was as a sober person. And so, it's been interesting for me too, because I've also had to change some of my things, social commitments that I like to do. I like to drink wine. Well, I'm not going to take my husband wine tasting, right? So we find new things to go and do. Hiking. We love hiking. Football with the kids. I think right now our main focus is our kids. We're investing in our futures. I think that's something that both of us didn't really have when we were kids. And we know what the importance is today. So we want those things for our kids today. So we're great today. We're great today. What was the second question?
Listeners, you can't see both Sasha and I, but actually I was looking up when she said that, and then I looked down and we actually have the exact same expression on our face, trying to remember what the second question. And the listeners are listening and they're probably saying, this was the second question. This was the second question. Okay. I don't remember what the second question is. Oh, I know what the second question was. Nailed it. How do you feel about the book being out and all the emotions and everything in the book? There we go.
I'm excited for him. It's a little weird that people know, my name or my story a little bit, and I don't know who they are. So that's a little interesting. But, if this book could just help one person or one family member, then his job is done. He needed to get his story out in order to heal. And I love that this is doing that for him. It's helping him heal. I've watched him write his second book. His second book is finished. We're editing it at the moment before it goes off.
He told us the name, but remind us the name of it's Craving.
Called Craving Identity.
Identity.
We already have the name of the next book as well. We came up with the name Craving Identity together because really it's, who are you after rehab? Who are you when you get sober? Who are you because you've been under this mask for so long? Who is this new person? So you kind of go through all of these challenges to find out who you are. And it's important. And I don't think it's just made for addicts or alcoholics. I think this book could help everybody because we all need to know who we are. We're all searching for us, what makes us tick and what our passions are. And he's found his passion, and writing is his passion.
Fabulous. Okay. Is there anything you really wanted to make sure we covered today that we haven't covered?
I want to recap. So personally, for me, it was really important for me to know what I was getting myself into when my husband was coming home from rehab. So I immersed myself in books to understand the alcoholic brain, to understand the needs that he was going to need and things that I could do for him while being open-minded, while being supportive, and also learning at the same time, because this is a new journey for us both, right? We haven't done this journey together or individually. So this is just all learning. So it's super important to have a great support system, whether it be family or friends or AA or Al-Anon. I never did Al-Anon. I read the Al-Anon book or the big book because in the back of the big book, there's Al-Anon as well. I did read some of the chapters of there. For me, it was hard to identify because a lot of things, my husband didn't have a car accident or have to kill somebody or was forced to become sober where a lot of people have been mandated to be. And so it's not their choice to become sober. This was his choice. So I find that just really important. That's it. That's all I have to say.
I think you just glow when you were talking about how in love you are with him and how great you guys are doing. I can just see that exuding from your body. It's beautiful. And this podcast is, because it's a mental health podcast right now, we don't share video. But listeners, I wish you could see the video of this because Sasha is glowing and it's gorgeous. Okay, so a requirement of the podcast is that you share your favorite motivational quote. So what is your favorite motivational quote?
Okay, so I don't know if this is actually a quote that somebody quoted, but my favorite quote, it's my personal, it is what it is, and that's what it is. For me, that speaks to control. You only have control of what your response is to people. You have control over your thoughts, but you don't have control over others. So for me, it is what it is, and that's what it is.
Love it. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Ange. I appreciate the time.
Amazing. You just listened to episode number 27, the second in our Young Family series, where Sasha shared her perspective of walking through her husband Joshua's recovery from alcohol. Now, if you didn't listen to episode 26 yet, make sure you check it out. Next week, we'll release episode 28, which will focus on Sasha's own personal trauma and healing journey. We hope you've been encouraged and learned something from today's story. As a reminder, the experiences and advice expressed in this episode are the host and guest's own personal stories and do not represent the opinions of any organization mentioned. RAN is passionate about opening the doors for all voices and experiences, not just those expressed in any particular podcast. If you want to share your experiences or expertise, we encourage you to be a future guest by emailing us at podcast@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org or submit a blog post by emailing blog@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org. We also want to encourage you to comment on the episode so that we can continue to provide content that is most beneficial to the community. If you do, we'll give you a shout out. We are proud that every individual working with RAN does so on a 100% volunteer basis. You can support the mission by clicking the love, not like icon on our podcast and subscribing. The reception of this podcast has blown us away, and hence we are seeking volunteers. If you're interested in helping, please email us at podcast@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org. We hope you will also connect with us at www.recoveryadvocatenetwork.org, where you can donate to the mission, read blog posts, and stay in the loop about upcoming events. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Recovery Advocate Network and on Twitter at Ran to Wellness. So, listeners, pause what you're doing and subscribe. Follow us, give us a 5-star rating, provide some feedback, and share these episodes with your friends. You never know whose hearts you will touch. Be a part of the reason someone has new hope today. If this episode was triggering to you, we encourage you to contact your support system, therapist, national and community support groups, the Global Crisis Text Line by texting 741-741, and/or, if in the United States, dialing 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you're in the U.S. and need additional resources such as shelter, support group resources, transportation, food, and/or a safe, confidential path out of physical and/or emotional domestic abuse, call 211 or visit www.211info.org for assistance. If you wish to provide feedback, please once again leave comments on the episode or email us. And we know you're super busy. There are a lot of things you could do with your time, and so we're really grateful you chose today to spend some time with us. So sit back, relax, back to your coffee. We hope to see you again next week.